Emma Sinclair's breath caught in her throat as she stepped through the revolving doors of Hawthorne and Sinclair Enterprises. The late afternoon sun slanted between glass and steel pillars, illuminating decades of her family's legacy in a series of long, golden beams. Once, this lobby had been her playground. She'd raced among these columns as a child, laughed beneath the grand chandelier at holiday galas, and sat by her father's side when he explained the weight of every business decision. Today, it felt like an altar to betrayal. Clutched in her trembling hand was a copy of the final codicil, a will she had spent months contesting, and which now bore a forged signature, a mismatched notary seal, and the single, cruel declaration that Emma Sinclair, only child, devoted heir, and company rising star, was to be written out of her father's empire. In her place stood her cousin Celia Harper, a quiet girl she'd last seen at family weddings, now positioned as sole successor to a multi-billion-dollar fortune. Emma forced herself to lift her chin and walk forward, heels clicking on polished marble. Each step resonated with the voice of her father, Jacob Sinclair, who had taught her from toddlerhood that integrity was sterling and that titles and wealth were meaningless without them. But tonight, as she approached the imposing bronze portrait of her father, depicted younger, brimming with optimism, she felt only despair. How had love twisted into such a lethal weapon, she wondered? How could someone within her own bloodline rip everything away? In the hushed corridors, she swallowed her outrage. There would be no ceremonial breakdown. This was war by paperwork and whispered alliances, and Emma intended to win. Not just for her own sake, but to expose the rot beneath her family's gilded facade. The game had begun. 30 years earlier, Jacob Sinclair arrived in New York as a penniless immigrant with nothing but a battered suitcase and a degree in textile engineering. The son of a factory worker in northern England, he'd watched his family struggle through strike after shutdown. By age 25, he resolved two things. One, that he would never depend on anyone else for his livelihood, and two, that he would build something lasting, an enterprise that championed quality, ethics, and community. He founded Hawthorne and Sinclair Enterprises in a cramped Brooklyn loft, hand-sewing designer scarves by night while selling them at local markets by day. His early clients were art students, bohemians, and anyone who appreciated a story behind their clothes. Word of mouth spread. Each scarf carried a card explaining Jacob's mission, crafted with care, worn with integrity. By the time Emma was born, the business was already on the cusp of expansion. In 1988, Jacob married Lydia Hartwell, a rising journalist renowned for her investigative tenacity. Lydia believed in Jacob's dream and lent her narrative flair to his marketing. Her feature articles turned obscure artisans into household names and drove Hawthorne and Sinclair's sales into the millions. Their partnership, both romantic and professional, was the stuff of business world legend. They moved into a brownstone overlooking Central Park, adopted rescue dogs, and whispered to Emma bedtime stories about honesty and family honor. But in 1993, when Emma was just 5, Lydia was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. Jacob refused to accept her prognosis. He hosted fundraisers in the Boardroom, rallied clients for charity drives, and even commissioned a scholarship fund in her name. Yet despite his tireless efforts, Lydia succumbed within 6 months. Emma recalled the day her mother slipped from her grip in the hospital ICU, a flicker of candlelight in her smile, a final whisper of, "Be brave." That loss carved a wound in the family's soul, one that neither time nor success could fully heal. Marjorie Sinclair Harper, Jacob's younger sister-in-law, entered the Sinclair orbit after Lydia's funeral. A poised socialite with an uncanny knack for fundraising, she offered to organize tribute events in Lydia's honor. Jacob, overwhelmed by grief, accepted. Marjorie's events were flawless: operatic performances, silk-draped tents, and celebrity guests. The press praised her grace under sorrow. The board applauded her organizational brilliance. Within months, Marjorie sat on the board herself, At first, Emma viewed Marjorie as a comforting presence, a kindly aunt who helped her navigate birthday parties without her mother. Yet behind Marjorie's warm smile lay ambition. She began suggesting new product lines that baffled Jacob's engineers, quietly influenced hiring decisions, and rebranded old collections under her own creative direction. Emma noted the subtle shift in corporate culture. Proposals Emma drafted with pride were delegated to Marjorie's team. Philanthropic initiatives in Lydia's name were repackaged under Marjorie's patronage. Whispers circulated about Marjorie's growing power, but no one dared confront her. She was family, and family, it was said, moved in mysterious, unchallenged currents. By the time Emma reached her teens, the Sinclair household felt divided. Mementos of Lydia were tucked away in glass cases. Family photographs omitted her presence. The brownstone's East Wing, once Lydia's beloved art gallery, sat silent, reserved for board meetings. Emma instinctively understood not to ask why. Within the company, board members navigated a treacherous dance. Some remained fiercely loyal to Jacob's founding principles. Others aligned with Marjorie's forward-looking vision, believing she offered the modern edge necessary for global expansion. Emma's father oscillated between them, torn by gratitude for Marjorie's support during Lydia's illness and guilt for unwittingly ceding her influence. To Emma, this tension was an unspoken inheritance. She observed, she questioned, and she vowed that one day she would be strong enough to restore the true Sinclair legacy. As a child, Emma often helped her father in the Hawthorne and Sinclair showroom. At age 8, she practiced shaking hands with visiting clients. By 12, she could recite the company's P&L statements better than most interns. Jacob indulged her curiosity, showing her how raw materials were sourced, teaching her the ethics of fair trade, and gently correcting her when she assumed that profit was the only metric of success. Those early lessons formed Emma's moral core. Never sell your soul for a better price, her father would lecture as they inspected fabric samples from Indian weavers. People remember how you treat them long after they forget what you sold them. These aphorisms became her guiding lights, propelling her into Harvard Law School, where she graduated top of her class, specializing in corporate governance and estate litigation. Emma's college years were marked by scholarships in Lydia's name and summer internships at firms that coveted her razor-sharp intellect. She earned a reputation for meticulous brief writing and fearless courtroom presence. When she returned to New York at 26, Hawthorne and Sinclair welcomed her as the future of the firm. The board toasted her arrival, clients lined up for pro bono advice, marketing campaigns touted her inclusion as proof that the company remained family-run and forward-thinking. In her first year, Emma spearheaded a successful bid to acquire an eco-fabric startup, negotiated a merger with a European distributor, and launched a corporate social responsibility initiative that donated unsold inventory to charities. Her father beamed. Marjorie clenched her jaw. The boardroom, however, had changed. Where once Jacob ruled with paternal openness, seating Emma beside him as co-captain, now Marjorie presided over side conversations on her tablet. When Emma presented a proposal to expand into South America, Marjorie interrupted with queries about market readiness and cultural sensitivity, questions that Emma had already addressed in her 30-page deck. It was as if Marjorie wielded an invisible veto power, never outright rejecting ideas, but delaying them indefinitely under pretext of additional due diligence. Emma learned the language of corporate subterfuge, committee delays, optional pilot programs, and task forces that dissolved without report. Each time Emma overcame a hurdle, another appeared courtesy of Marjorie's whisper campaigns. Rumors surfaced that Emma lacked experience in international negotiations, that her legal background made her risk-averse, that she was too sentimental to run the family business. Emma's frustration grew, but she refused to retaliate, determined to win through merit, not mudslinging. Despite the friction, Emma maintained strong alliances with two key allies, Marcus Lee, a forensic accountant, and childhood friend from Jacob's first Brooklyn days. Marcus had remained off the board, preferring spreadsheets to power lunches, but he admired Emma's commitment to truth. He supplied her with financial analyses, tracking phantom expenses and shell companies that hinted at embezzlement or self-dealing. Sophia Reyes, Emma's law school classmate turned mediator. Sophia believed in family reconciliation above all else. She cautioned patience and advocated private negotiations, convinced that an out-of-court settlement could preserve both Emma's legacy and the business's reputation. Yet even these alliances carried tension. Marcus grew increasingly impatient with procedural delays. Sophia worried that public exposure would irreparably harm personal relationships. Emma found herself pulled between their counsel, law and order justice versus compassionate diplomacy. 3 weeks before the annual corporate gala, Emma immersed herself in planning the Lydia Sinclair Memorial Scholarship, a fund that would support first-generation women pursuing business degrees. To Emma, it was the perfect tribute, merging her mother's journalistic advocacy with her father's entrepreneurial spirit. She drafted press releases, coordinated with Harvard's Dean of Students, and secured seeded donations from longtime clients. Even Marjorie offered mild praise at a planning meeting. "A lovely initiative, Emma, truly befitting Lydia's name." Emma sensed a twinge of calculation beneath that smile, but dismissed it. This was about honoring her mother. The gala invitations, printed on pearl-finished cardstock, soon arrived on the desks of socialites, politicians, and industry titans. Emma envisioned the scholarship announcement as the night's centerpiece, the cork-popping moment when Lydia's memory would blaze across the headlines. On gala night, the grand ballroom of the Gotham Hotel dazzled with crystal chandeliers, cascading orchids, and live quartets playing Vivaldi. Women in silk gowns and men in tuxedos drifted across silver-leaf dance floors. Emma, in a slate-gray sheath dress with a single strand of pearls Lydia had worn on their last mother-daughter dinner, felt a familiar thrill. She was no longer the anxious child in oversized party dresses, but the poised face of the family legacy. Jacob, looking frail in his tailored suit, greeted VIPs at the entrance. Marjorie flanked him, her hair perfectly coiffed, greeting guests with practiced warmth. Nearby, Celia Harper, Marjorie's only child, stood slightly apart, her powder blue gown shimmering. Celia's pale smile looked borrowed, and her eyes flickered whenever Marjorie touched her arm. Emma took her father's arm and led him to their reserved table, where Marcus and Sophia waited. She whispered, "Tonight we show them what family truly means." Marcus gave a curt nod. Sophia squeezed her hand encouragingly. Shortly before dessert, Emma was called to the podium. She stepped into the light, inhaling deeply. "Tonight," she began, "we celebrate not just a company, but a legacy of integrity and compassion. In memory of my mother, Lydia Hartwell Sinclair, I'm honored to announce the establishment of a scholarship fund to uplift future generations of female leaders." Applause rippled through the room. Backstage, Emma watched from the wings as her father stood to accept her tribute. Then she noticed, through the ornate mirrored panels, a swift exchange. Marjorie slipped a sealed, unmarked envelope into Jacob's inner coat pocket. The motion was invisible to most, but Emma's legal instincts flared. She tracked Marjorie's furtive glance as she brushed past Jacob, then coolly rejoined her guests. Her pulse quickened. What could be so urgent that needed delivering at this moment? Emma's questions multiplied, but before she could investigate, cameras swarmed, and waiters carried out silver trays of crème brûlée. After the formal program ended, Emma cornered Marcus. "Did you see that?" she hissed. Marcus, ever the skeptic, frowned. "Just an envelope. Could be papers for your scholarship. Don't jump to conclusions." Sophia, hovering nearby, added, "Let's enjoy the evening. If there's cause for concern, we'll handle it tomorrow." Emma forced a smile, but sleep eluded her that night. She rewatched mental footage of the gala, noting Marjorie's perfectly timed distraction of the valet and Celia's acute awareness of her mother's every move. By dawn, Emma resolved to uncover the envelope's contents, if only to quell her rising unease. At 8 a.m., Emma arrived at the firm's headquarters, earlier than usual, to find the front page of the Financial Tribune spread across the lobby newsstands. Sinclair succession, shocker, founder's sudden retirement, and new sole heir stun markets. The subtitle read, Celia Harper named exclusive beneficiary of $4.2 billion empire. Emma's stomach twisted. She grabbed the paper and ran to her father's study, where Jacob sat behind his desk, pale and quiet, his hands folded like a supplicant's. "Dad, what is this?" Her voice shook. Jacob looked at her with sorrowful eyes. "Emma, this wasn't my wish. I've been unwell. Heart problems, fatigue. The doctors say stress doesn't help." He tapped the codicil on his desk. "I thought it best. I didn't want you burdened with the company and my health concerns." Emma's mind raced. But this codicil was forged. She had studied every signature on her father's documents. No one could replicate Lydia's elegant handwriting and her father's rushed scrawl on that envelope. "Dad, who wrote this? This isn't your signature." Jacob's gaze wavered. Marjorie drew it up. She handled the paperwork. His admission felt like a confession. Emma sank into the leather chair. Marjorie, the woman she'd once regarded as an aunt, now appeared as a puppeteer, pulling strings behind the scenes. Emma forced herself to speak. "You signed it?" Jacob's silence was answer enough. "Dad, you must know this is binding under corporate bylaws. Once a will is probated and the board ratifies succession, it's irrevocable without a court's intervention. And that takes years." At that moment, Marjorie entered the study, her composure immaculate. "Emma, dear, troubling to see you so upset. I only acted in your father's best interest. Celia is bright, fresh-eyed, and ready to lead." Her tone held a calculated edge, sympathy laced with condescension. "You used Dad's failing health to place Celia in power," Emma retorted. "You hid the codicil until after the gala, slept on it, maybe paid off the notary?" Marjorie's cheeks flushed imperceptibly. "I assure you, everything was above board." She offered Emma a cool nod and withdrew, leaving Emma and Jacob alone in the echoing study. Emma looked at her father. "We fight this. I won't let her steal everything you built." Jacob closed his eyes. "Emma, I'm proud of you, but legal battles can break families. Are you prepared for us to become public enemies?" Emma clenched her fists. "I am. I'll spend every dollar we must prove this forgery." Within hours, Emma met with the firm's general counsel, Victor Lang. A gray-haired lawyer with decades in estate litigation, Lang outlined the challenges. Probate deadline. The window to contest a will was 120 days from Jacob's resignation announcement. Forensic proof courts required incontrovertible evidence of forgery, expert handwriting analysis, notary records, and alibi verification. Injunctions. To halt Celia's appointment, Emma needed an emergency restraining order, a difficult ask without prima facie proof. Public exposure. Filing suit would attract media scrutiny, risking reputational harm to the Sinclair brand. Emma absorbed each point. The path ahead was fraught, but the alternative, capitulation, was unthinkable. She left Lang's office with a stack of documents, her mind already racing through strategies. Emma's first call was to Marcus Lee, whose loft doubled as a financial forensics lab of spreadsheets, server racks, and filing cabinets. Marcus greeted her with a bear hug. "Emma, I've cataloged every document tied to the codicil. The ink's not just a different batch. It's from a pen brand phased out 3 years ago, and the notary stamp was issued by an office in Jersey, one Jacob never visited." Marcus laid out 24 sheets, side-by-side images of genuine signatures, close-ups of paper fibers, and metadata from scanned files. "I can compile a comprehensive report, but we'll need more. Testimony from the notary, statements from staff who saw the document drafted, and logs from Jacob's calendar." Emma nodded, heart pounding. "Do it. I'll reach out to Sophia next." Sophia met Emma at a quiet cafe near the East River. Over steaming lattes, Sophia listened silently, her brow furrowed. You want my help, but you know I believe in preserving whatever is left of family harmony. She slid a folder across the table. I've drafted a mediation proposal. We can invite Marjorie and Celia to talk. Someone neutral, an elder family friend, or professional mediator. Offer them a share in the scholarship oversight, or a seat on the board in exchange for rescinding the codicil. Emma appreciated the gesture, but shook her head. Marjorie isn't interested in compromise. And Celia? She was an outsider yesterday. Today she's heir apparent. Mediation is just a stalling tactic for them. Sophia hesitated. If you go straight to court, you risk losing the company forever, and your father's legacy with it. But if you pursue both tracks, mediate in good faith while building your legal case, you'll look reasonable in front of judges and shareholders. Emma considered this dual approach. Public perception mattered. Okay, let's draft the mediation notice, but don't send it yet. I need you beside me when we confront her. Next, Emma enlisted Mrs. Delgado, Jacob's secretary of 20 years. Mrs. Delgado's soft-spoken loyalty belied her fierce protective streak for the Sinclair family. In her neatly organized office, she produced a set of unsigned draft documents Marjorie had requested last quarter, purportedly to rewrite the original will. Marjorie always insisted on finalizing this update in private meetings. I kept these copies hidden. I didn't trust her. These drafts contained marginal notes in Marjorie's handwriting, cryptic phrases like, finalize before gala, require father's quick sign-off, and ensure secure notary. To Emma, they were smoking guns. She scanned the pages into encrypted files, while Mrs. Delgado wiped away tears. Your father deserves the truth, she whispered. With evidence mounting, Emma called a secret strategy session in her downtown loft, inviting only Marcus and Sophia. The windows looked out over the skyline, an ironic reminder of what was at stake. Emma opened the meeting. We proceed on two fronts. First, we finalize Marcus's forensic report and obtain sworn affidavits from the notary and any witnesses. Second, we prepare the mediation proposal to demonstrate our willingness to resolve this amicably. Sophia interjected, we should also prepare a press statement, a controlled release if Marjorie tries to spin this. Sinclair family explores mediation over estate matters, something that shows you're seeking peace. Marcus nodded. And I'll coordinate with an investigative journalist I trust. We can leak key findings to build public support before the hearing. Emma felt a surge of determination. Surrounded by her most trusted allies, she realized she didn't have to fight alone. Together, they could dismantle Marjorie's scheme brick by brick and reclaim not just a fortune, but the truth. Early on a Monday morning, Emma arrived at Lang & Partners, the venerable estate-litigation firm handling her case. Outside the stately brownstone, a brass plaque read, Victor Lang, ESQ, Probate and Trusts. Emma's heart clenched as she climbed the marble steps. Every file, every evidence sheet, every witness statement now condensed into a single lawsuit pleading. Inside, Victor Lang, silver hair impeccably combed, thick glasses resting on the bridge of his nose, greeted her with a grave nod. Miss Sinclair, he said, voice low, we've drafted the petition. We're naming Marjorie Sinclair Harper, Celia Harper, and the notary, Simone Blake, as defendants. We'll argue undue influence, forgery, and lack of testamentary capacity. Lang laid out the timeline of legal filings. Complaint submission. Immediate to initiate contest. Temporary restraining order. To halt Celia's appointment and any transfer of assets, requiring proof of immediate harm. Discovery phase. Deposition of witnesses. Document production. Forensic reports. Mediation attempt. Courts often require parties to attempt settlement before trial. Trial, a bench or jury trial to determine the will's validity. Emma watched as Lang underlined key passages on the complaint. Phrases like fraudulent conduct, conflict of interest, and breach of fiduciary duty. Each term resonated like a drumbeat in her veins. Word of Emma's suit leaked quickly. Within 48 hours, Lang received a bombshell. Marjorie's attorneys had filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that Jacob had consciously and competently executed the codicil, and that Emma's delay in challenging it, she filed on day 113 of 120, invalidated her claim. They also moved for sanctions, alleging Emma's suit was harassing and destabilizing to the company. Emma's inbox flooded with cold notices, cease and desist letters, demands for mediation, and threats of countersuits for defamation. Her email pings echoed like harbingers of war. The board, pressured by both factions, scheduled an emergency session to discuss interim governance, potentially sidelining Emma entirely. By the end of the week, the Global Business Review ran a front-page exposé. Sinclair scandal. Daughter's lawsuit threatens boardroom stability. The article painted Emma as a spoiled heiress attacking her own family, quoting anonymous board members who decried internal divisions and disloyalty. Social media buzz amplified the narrative. #Sinclair saga trended on Twitter, with pundits speculating whether Hawthorne and Sinclair would collapse under the weight of its own secrets. Emma's phone buzzed nonstop, journalists requesting interviews, bloggers decrying her PR stunt, clients calling to express concern. She realized painstaking legal strategy wasn't enough. She needed to control the story. That evening, Emma, Sophia, and Victor Lang convened in a private meeting room. The walls, lined with mahogany bookshelves, exuded old-world gravitas. Lang pushed a draft statement across the table. Miss Sinclair has filed this suit not out of greed, but to preserve the integrity of her father's legacy and protect the company's future. She remains committed to fair resolution and invites all parties to pursue mediation. Sophia added talking points, emphasizing Emma's history of philanthropy and her devotion to Lydia's scholarship. "We need human faces," Sophia urged. "Feature the students who benefited from Emma's programs. Show that this is about preserving a legacy of compassion, not corporate infighting." Emma nodded. "Agreed. Draft a press release for Monday morning, and set up interviews with 2 scholarship recipients, Sarah Chen and Maria Torres. They owe their educations to what my mother started." Lang cautioned, "Be mindful of what they say. Media can twist sound bites." Emma replied firmly, "I'll coach them. We control the narrative." Monday dawned cold and gray. At 9 a.m., Emma stood before a bank of cameras in the firm's conference room, flanked by Marcus, Sophia, and 2 tear-stained but resolute scholarship students. Flashbulbs popped as she read the statement, voice steady but eyes glistening. "I love my family. I love this company. But I cannot stand by while a fraudulent document destroys both. Today, I fight not for myself, but for every person who believed in my father's vision, for Sarah and Maria, and for the memory of my mother." The students shared their testimonies, how Lydia's name had opened doors, how Emma's mentorship had guided them. Their heartfelt words cut through the cynicism like a beam of light. Within hours, social media shifted. #Stand with Emma trended. Op-eds praised her courage. Clients expressed renewed confidence. Yet, behind the glow, Marjorie's camp worked furiously to counter with leaked emails suggesting Emma had once considered selling the company to a foreign conglomerate. The tug-of-war between truth and spin intensified, setting the stage for the grueling discovery process ahead. As discovery unfolded, Emma leaned heavily on Sophia, her mediator-turned-ally. They spent long evenings reviewing deposition transcripts, drafting settlement terms, and planning the mediation proposal. Sophia's warmth and steady counsel had been Emma's lifeline through sleepless nights. Yet, as the trial date neared, Emma noticed subtle shifts in Sophia's behavior. She canceled meetings at the last minute, her phone calls went unanswered, and she seemed unusually guarded when Emma asked about her weekend plans. Emma brushed it off. Stress did strange things, but a persistent knot of doubt grew in her stomach. One evening, unable to sleep, Emma revisited her encrypted file of draft documents from Mrs. Delgado. Among the miscellaneous notes, she found something she'd missed: an email thread between Sophia and Marjorie's lead counsel, dated 2 months earlier. In it, Sophia had proposed a confidential advisory arrangement, offering to shape Marjorie's negotiation strategy in exchange for a substantial consulting fee. Emma's blood ran cold. She clicked through the attachments: signed NDAs, wire transfer confirmations, and a Skype transcript where Sophia outlined Emma's likely legal arguments and evidence. Her so-called friend had been feeding the enemy. The next morning, Emma confronted Sophia in her office, a minimalist loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River. Sophia sat at her desk, phone in hand, startled by Emma's sudden entrance. "Sophia, we need to talk," Emma said, voice trembling. She laid the email thread on the glass table. Sophia's eyes widened, then flickered with guilt. "Sophia, why?" Emma's voice cracked. "You were my friend, my confidant. You promised to protect my father's legacy." Sophia stood, shoulders slumping. "Emma, I never meant—" Her voice broke. "I thought mediation was impossible. I saw Marjorie's offer. Huge money, influence. I told myself I could control it, that I'd sabotage them from the inside. But it spiraled out." Emma's chest constricted. "You betrayed me when I needed you most." She felt tears sting her eyes. "All those long nights, I thought you were at my side." Sophia reached out. "I'm so sorry. I'll hand over everything to you. The emails, the bank statements, everything. I'll testify against them." Her apology rang hollow to Emma's ears. Emma left the office in a daze, the city's skyscrapers blurring into gray. Marcus met her on the street. Without words, he handed her a chilled bottle of water and a folder containing Sophia's confession, a signed affidavit. Marcus said gently, "I'm sorry, Emma, but now we know their full strategy." Emma took a deep breath. The betrayal cut deeper than Marjorie's, but she steeled herself. "We press on," she said. "We use Sophia's statement as evidence of conspiracy, and we expose it at trial." Though her heart ached, Emma felt a fierce clarity. She would not allow personal pain to derail her mission. If anything, Sophia's treachery would become another arrow in her quiver. Back at Marcus's loft, Emma and Marcus pored over his final forensic dossier. 12 sections detailed the document's inconsistencies: paper age mismatches, microscopic ink grain analysis, digital file metadata pointing to tampering, and notarization records proving Simone Blake was out of town on the alleged signing date. Marcus packaged the report into a leather-bound volume stamped Exhibit A. "This is bulletproof," he said. "We can anticipate Marjorie's counters. She'll claim chain of custody issues or question the methodologies. But I've included cross-validation from 2 independent labs." Emma ran her fingers over the embossed cover. "Perfect. We submit this at the restraining order hearing. No judge can ignore it." Simultaneously, Emma reconnected with Ethan Collins, the investigative journalist Mrs. Delgado had vouched for. In a discreet lunch at a French bistro, Emma slid Collins a flash drive containing the draft documents, Sophia's affidavit, and key excerpts from Marcus's analysis. Collins, pen poised above his notebook, asked, "You understand that once I publish, there's no going back?" Emma nodded. "I know, but the court of public opinion will pressure the board more than any judge. We need them to see Marjorie's deceit for what it is." 2 days later, Collins's article went live. "Inside the Sinclair Scandal: An Empire Built on Deceit." The piece wove a gripping narrative: Jacob's immigrant story, Emma's mother's tragic legacy, the rise of Marjorie, and the stunning forgery. Collins quoted unnamed witnesses, included images of draft wills, and analyzed the forensic report's key findings. The tone was damning and precise. The fallout was immediate. The state's Department of Financial Services announced a preliminary inquiry into Hawthorne and Sinclair's governance. Board members, fearing regulatory penalties, demanded an emergency meeting. Even some of Marjorie's allies began to distance themselves. Emma seized the momentum. She circulated a detailed internal memo to the board, laying out her proposal for an independent review committee, co-chaired by herself and an external corporate governance expert. The committee's mandate: investigate all estate planning documents of the past decade, audit key decisions Marjorie had influenced, and recommend reforms. Under mounting pressure from regulators, from the press, and from the growing faction of board members demanding transparency, Marjorie agreed to the committee. Celia, realizing her position was precarious, faded from the limelight, her earlier confidence replaced by nervous reticence. On the morning of the hearing, Emma prepared in Lang's conference room. Victor Lang paced the polished floor, reciting procedural minutiae. Marcus arrived with several binders, each color-coded and tabbed. Even Mrs. Delgado appeared, clutching a small satchel of original draft wills and notary logs. Emma donned a tailored navy suit. No pearls, no sentimentality. This was business. She reviewed her opening statement. Your Honor, we present incontrovertible evidence that the December 10th codicil bears forged signatures, was notarized under false pretenses, and was executed through undue influence. We request an immediate injunction preventing transfer of any assets or board authority to respondents, pending full trial. Across the table, Marjorie sat with her legal team, her posture regal, lips pursed. Celia hovered behind her mother, shoulders stiff. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Emma, poised and resolute; Marjorie, anxious under the bright courtroom lights. Judge Ramirez, presiding, reviewed the exhibits. Marcus's forensic report, Mrs. Delgado's drafts, Sophia's affidavit, and Emma's own testimony. He questioned Simone Blake, the notary, who confirmed she'd been out of state on the purported signing date. He listened as Marjorie's counsel scrambled to offer alibis and challenged chain of custody. After a tense 90 minutes, Judge Ramirez banged his gavel. Based on the weight of evidence, this court finds sufficient prima facie proof of forgery and undue influence. The requested injunction is granted. Respondents are restrained from assuming any rights or assets under the contested codicil until the matter is finally adjudicated. A hush fell. Emma exhaled, tears pricking her eyes, but she held them back. She glanced at Jacob, who sat in the back row alongside Mrs. Delgado. He nodded, pride and relief mingling in his eyes. With the injunction in place, Emma's team shifted focus to the full trial and the independent review committee. Media coverage praised the judge's decision, crediting Emma's meticulous case-building. Marjorie's image took another hit as further drafting notes emerged under the committee's audit. Emma convened a meeting with the board, laying out her vision for governance reforms, multi-signatory estate changes, regular bylaws review, and a family council advisory council. She also proposed launching the Lydia Sinclair Scholarship Foundation under an independent nonprofit board, a permanent bulwark against future manipulations. One by one, board members voiced support. Even some of Marjorie's long-standing allies offered cautious praise. The boardroom, once a war zone, began to resemble a place of rebuilding. 2 weeks after the restraining order, Emma booked the stately Hawthorne and Sinclair boardroom for a special session titled Governance Review and Succession Resolution. Invitations went to all 12 board members, plus Jacob Sinclair, Mrs. Delgado, and the external governance expert, Dr. Anjali Patel, whose firm specialized in family business advisory. Marjorie Sinclair Harper and Celia Harper received separate notices, demanding their presence to respond to fresh evidence from the independent committee's audit. By 9 a.m., the long mahogany table was surrounded by anxious faces. Portraits of Jacob and Lydia hung behind a raised dais where the chairperson, Henry Radcliffe, waited to call the meeting to order. Cameras from the in-house communications team discreetly recorded proceedings. Emma entered last, carrying 2 binders, one labeled Forensic and Legal Findings, the other Governance Reform Proposal. She took her seat opposite Marjorie, feeling both the weight of her father's legacy and the full force of corporate expectation. Henry Radcliffe rapped his gavel. We're here to resolve the contested succession and address recent audit findings. Miss Sinclair, you have the floor. Emma stood, voice steady. Thank you. Over the past month, our independent review committee, co-chaired by Dr. Patel and me, has uncovered conclusive evidence of document forgery, undue influence, and procedural breaches in the December Codicil process. Today, I present that evidence and ask this board to reaffirm the rightful succession to Jacob Sinclair's original will, naming Emma Sinclair as sole heir and CEO designate. She handed Dr. Patel a binder. Dr. Patel, would you please summarize the committee's conclusions? Dr. Patel, a poised woman in her early 40s, adjusted her glasses. Our audit examined all estate planning documents from 2015 onward, interviewed 6 key staff, and evaluated notarization records. We found unauthorized drafts, multiple will drafts in Marjorie's handwriting, marked for non-public review. Notary irregularities. The notary on the final codicil, Miss Blake, never verified Jacob's signature in person. Timeline discrepancies. Excel metadata shows the codicil file was created 2 days after the digital signature date. Financial motive. Transfers of company stock shares to Celia's private accounts occurred within 24 hours of codicil execution. In our professional judgment, these breaches constitute both forgery and breach of fiduciary duty under state corporate law. A murmur rippled through the room. Marjorie, impeccably composed, slid a note to her attorney, whose eyes darted between her and Dr. Patel. Marjorie rose with practiced grace. I appreciate the committee's work, she began, voice cool, but conclusions aren't proof. Dr. Patel's team relied heavily on digital metadata, easily manipulated, and on hearsay from a single disaffected staff member. She gestured toward Mrs. Delgado. Miss Delgado, who admits she hid documents, is hardly an unbiased witness. She continued, furthermore, Jacob Sinclair's health has been fragile for years. He entrusted me, his closest confidant, to ensure continuity. The codicil reflects his wishes as he expressed them, whether in written or verbal instruction. Emma pressed her lips together, resisting the urge to interrupt. Marjorie's argument leaned on presumed verbal intent over documented fact. The board sat in tense silence, absorbing the rebuttal. Emma stood again, exuding quiet authority. Respectfully, Aunt Marjorie, your defense rests on presumed intent. Yet no minutes, emails, or recordings capture Jacob expressing any such desire. Courts require signed, notarized wills with transparent procedures precisely to prevent this scenario. If verbal intent supersedes formalities, any disgruntled relative could rewrite history. She clicked a button, and a projection lit up the far wall. A timeline juxtaposing Jacob's known whereabouts with the codicil's creation, overlaid with ink analysis snapshots and notary registry logs. Board members leaned forward, eyes narrowing on discrepancies Marjorie had no answer for. Moreover, Emma continued, the transfer of 15% of company shares to Celia's account on December 11th violated our bylaws, which require board approval for any single-day transfer exceeding 5%. That stock movement itself is grounds for fraud investigation. Marjorie's attorney whispered to her. She shook her head minutely, confidence faltering. Henry Radcliffe called for a brief recess. Adjourned into a side room, members whispered behind closed doors. Emma's pulse pounded as she exchanged glances with Mrs. Delgado, who offered a small, encouraging nod. 15 minutes later, everyone reconvened. Henry stood, face solemn. We've heard both sides, reviewed Dr. Patel's report, and considered the legal advisories. We proceed to vote on 2 motions. Motion A, rescind the December 10th codicil, reaffirm succession per the 2012 will. Motion B, approve governance reforms proposed by Miss Sinclair. Emma's heart thundered as hands rose one by one. Motion A, 8 in favor, 3 opposed, 1 abstention. Motion B, 10 in favor, 2 opposed. With the board's formal vote, Emma's rightful claim was restored. Jacob's original will be reaffirmed. Emma Sinclair was named CEO designate, effective immediately upon Jacob's official retirement date. Marjorie sat frozen, her face an immaculate mask of composure, while Celia's shoulders slumped. Emma felt a rush of victory and a pang of sorrow at the cost of familial fracture. In the days following the boardroom vote, Marjorie faced internal disciplinary proceedings. Though the board stopped short of shareholder-forced removal, to avoid further public drama, she was stripped of all executive responsibilities, banned from accessing corporate documents, and placed on unpaid leave pending criminal inquiry. Celia, devastated by the reversal, resigned. She released a public statement expressing regret over her involvement and a desire to learn and grow from these events. Emma arranged for Celia to receive pro bono counseling and career coaching, honoring her father's compassionate ethos even toward those who'd wronged her. Emma, now acting CEO, moved swiftly to implement reforms. Estate Oversight Committee, a rotating council of family members, independent directors, and outside experts to approve any future estate planning changes. Dual notary protocol. All high-level documents require signatures before 2 separate notaries and an external legal auditor. Bylaws revision. Added provisions for automatic injunction triggers upon contested codicil filings to prevent asset transfers during probate disputes. Scholarship endowment. The Lydia Sinclair Memorial Scholarship Foundation was spun off as a standalone nonprofit with its own board, ensuring the fund's integrity. The company's internal communications heralded these changes as restoring the Sinclair promise of transparency and trust. Clients, suppliers, and the press responded with relief and admiration. Hawthorne and Sinclair's stock tickers rebounded. Trust metrics in stakeholder surveys rose by 24% within a month. One evening, after the board meeting, Emma found her father in his study. He sat by the window, gazing at the city lights, a half-empty glass of scotch in hand. "Emma," he said softly, "I've lived my life by honor, in business and in love. I'm sorry I let my grief and trust blind me to Marjorie's ambition. I'm sorry for every moment you felt sidelined." Emma knelt beside him, placing a hand on his. "You taught me what mattered most. It was my duty to protect that lesson, and this company. I couldn't watch your legacy be stolen." Jacob smiled, tears brimming. "You've done more than I ever could. You've not only saved the business, but you've also saved my faith. In family and in the future. I'm proud of you, Emma Sinclair." They embraced, a moment of genuine healing after months of pain. Emma realized that while the corporate battle had ended, the more delicate work of rebuilding personal trust was only beginning.
Expert Corner Advice. Hire specialized estate litigation counsel. Why it matters. Estate disputes hinge on complex probate laws, evidentiary standards, and corporate bylaws. General civil litigators may lack nuanced understanding of wills, trusts, and fiduciary duties. Action steps. Select a firm with a proven track record in high-stakes probate contests and corporate governance litigations. Vet credentials. Look for certified specialists in estate litigation, membership in the American College of Trust and Estate Council, ACTEC, and published appellate decisions. Clarify fee structures. Negotiate contingency or blended fees for document-heavy cases to manage costs. Utilize mediation strategically. Why it matters. Mediation can resolve conflicts more swiftly and with less reputational damage than protracted court battles. It signals reasonableness to judges and stakeholders. Action steps. Engage a neutral mediator with experience in family business disputes. Ideally, someone with an MBA or law degree plus mediation certification. Propose clear issue lists. Define contested matters, for example, codicil validity, asset freezes, and desired outcomes. Prepare what-if scenarios. Determine your minimum acceptable settlement terms, then frame concessions to appear magnanimous without undermining core objectives. Preserve and authenticate evidence. Why it matters. Forgery and undue influence claims require robust evidence, handwriting analysis, notary logs, digital metadata, and witness testimony. Action steps. Secure originals of all drafts, wills, and correspondence. Store them in a fire-safe or digital vault with strict access control. Record chain of custody. Document every person who handled the documents with dates and times. Engage forensic experts for handwriting analysis, ink dating, and digital timestamp verification from accredited labs, for example, the American Board of Forensic Document Examiners. Manage public relations proactively. Why it matters. Media narratives shape stakeholder perceptions and can influence regulators, investors, and jurists. Effective PR can mitigate damage and build support. Action steps. Retain a crisis communications firm specializing in legal disputes. Develop key messages. Keep them consistent across press releases, interviews, and social media. Emphasize legacy, integrity, and concern for all parties. Prepare stakeholder briefs. Send targeted updates to clients, employees, and partners to reassure them of business continuity. Institute governance safeguards. Why it matters. Family businesses are uniquely vulnerable to insider disputes. Clear protocols prevent unilateral actions and ensure transparency. Action steps. Dual signatory requirements. Mandate 2 independent approvals for estate amendments and high-value asset transfers. Regular reviews. Schedule annual audits of estate plans with external counsel present. Family Council. Establish a rotating advisory body for succession planning, with equal representation from family and non-family executives. Succession Charter. Draft a formal succession plan, reviewed by an independent trustee, stipulating conditions for leadership changes, division of shares, and dispute resolution pathways.
Coming next, broken vows, topics, divorce, infidelity, revenge. After 20 years of marriage built on shared dreams and whispered promises, Claire Donovan uncovers her husband's secret year-long affair with none other than his high-powered law partner. As she prepares to announce their divorce at the firm's glittering gala, Claire must decide, will she publicly shatter his carefully constructed world, or will the lingering embers of their love force her to face a choice between justice and forgiveness? Stay tuned to see how far Claire will go when vows are broken and loyalties lie in ruins.